My grandmother called them the forest walkers, beings who existed in the space between legend and memory, spoken of in winter stories but dismissed by everyone under 40 as metaphor. I was 15 when I learned they were neither legend nor metaphor, but living remnants of a world we'd almost forgotten how to see. My name is Maya Blackwater, and I grew up on the Quinault Reservation in Washington State, where the rainforest grows so thick that satellite maps show nothing but green canopy for miles. In 2005, I was a sophomore struggling between two worlds, the reservation where I was too modern, and the high school in town where I was too native. I didn't fit anywhere cleanly, so I spent most of my time in the forest with my grandmother, learning plant medicines and old stories that my mother insisted were holding me back. Then I met one of the forest walkers during a coming-of-age ceremony in the deep woods, and he spoke to me in a language I shouldn't have understood, a mixture of gesture, vocalization, and something older than words. When I tried to tell people what happened, my own family thought I was lying or disturbed, until the night the forest walker came to save my grandmother's life, and everyone had to choose what they believed. The Quinault Reservation spans over 200,000 acres of some of the wettest, wildest, temperate rainforest in North America. My grandmother, Eleanor Blackwater, was one of the last full fluent speakers of Quinault language, and a respected medicine woman who kept the old knowledge alive despite the modern world pressing in from all sides. She raised me after my father died in a logging accident when I was 7. My mother, grief-stricken and struggling, moved to Seattle for work, visiting monthly, but essentially leaving me in Grandma's care. At first I resented it, missing my mother, feeling abandoned, but Grandma taught me to see the forest as home, to identify medicines in bark and root, to understand that some knowledge lives in the land itself. The forest walkers are our relatives, she'd say, gathering Devil's Club in the deep woods. Very old relatives who chose a different path. They remember what we've forgotten, how to live without taking more than needed, how to speak with the land instead of commanding it. I'd nod politely, assuming she was being metaphorical like the teachers at school who talked about respecting nature while checking their phones. But Grandma was literal. She'd leave offerings at certain locations, dried salmon, cedar branches, berries, always with a soft-spoken prayer in Quinault. For the forest walkers, she'd explain, they protect the deep places. We honor them. By 15, I was caught between worlds. At Tahola High School, I was the reservation girl who brought weird lunches and spoke a language nobody understood. On the res, I was too whitewashed, too interested in biology textbooks and college applications. I had friends in neither place, just Grandma in the forest. That summer, Grandma announced it was time for my skilali toot, a traditional coming-of-age ceremony that involved 4 days alone in the forest, fasting and seeking vision. My mother protested on the phone. "Mom, that's not safe. She's 15. What if something happens?" "The forest will teach her what she needs to know," Grandma replied calmly. "It taught you. It taught me. It taught your grandmother." So in late July, Grandma led me 8 miles into roadless wilderness, to a traditional site used for generations. She built me a small shelter, gave me water but no food, and explained, "You sit, you listen, you pay attention to what the forest shows you. After 4 days, I return. What if I see nothing? Then you see nothing, and that teaches you something too." She touched my face gently. "But you have the gift, child. You hear what others miss. Trust that." She left at dawn, and I was alone with only the forest sounds. Constant rain on leaves, creek water over stones, the occasional call of ravens. By the second day, hunger had sharpened my senses into something strange and clear. Colors seemed brighter, sounds more distinct, the boundary between myself and the forest softer. On the third night, I heard something impossible. Footsteps. Heavy, bipedal, deliberate. Not deer, not elk, not bear. Something walking upright through terrain where humans rarely ventured. The sound circled my shelter in the darkness, and I should have been terrified, but something in the rhythm felt curious rather than threatening. Then came vocalizations. Low, complex, almost musical. Not animal sounds, but not human speech either. Something between something other. I crawled to the shelter opening and saw him by moonlight filtering through the canopy, an 8-foot figure covered in dark hair, standing at the edge of the clearing, watching me with eyes that reflected light like amber glass. A forest walker. Real. Impossible. Staring directly at me. We looked at each other across 20 feet of forest floor, both frozen in mutual assessment. He was massive, broader than any human, with shoulders that seemed capable of breaking trees, hands that hung past his knees. His face was profoundly unsettling in its almost human quality. Heavy brow ridge, flat nose, lips that seemed capable of complex expression. But it was the intelligence in his eyes that stopped my breath. This wasn't an animal evaluating threat. This was a person deciding whether to approach. Grandma's words surfaced from memory. They are relatives. Very old relatives. I did something that came from instinct rather than thought. I spoke in Kano, the language Grandma had drilled into me since childhood, the language nobody my age bothered learning because, what's the point? I see you, elder brother, I said, using the formal greeting. I mean no harm. His reaction was immediate. His entire posture changed. Surprise, then something like recognition. He made a sound, complex and tonal, that my ears couldn't quite parse. Then he gestured, large hands moving in deliberate patterns that looked almost like sign language. I gestured back, the hand-speak Grandma had taught me for use in hunting when silence was required. Universal signs. Peace, respect, questioning. He stepped closer, moving with surprising grace despite his size. 10 feet away. 5 feet. Close enough that I could smell him. Earth and pine and something wild. Something ancient. He crouched down, bringing his eyes level with mine, and spoke again. This time, impossibly, I understood. Not the literal sounds, but the meaning beneath them. The language was tonal, gestural, intuitive, communication that bypassed literal translation and went straight to intent. You speak the old words, the forest words. Few do anymore. My grandmother taught me, I said in Kino, combining it with gestures. She says you are our relatives. She remembers correctly. We walked together once, long ago, before the forgetting. The forgetting? He gestured broadly. At the forest, at the stars visible through canopy gaps, at something beyond physical sight, when your people chose the path of taking, building, owning, naming everything. We chose the path of being, watching, remembering, taking nothing but what the forest gives freely. You've been here all along? Here and elsewhere, the deep places, the forgotten places. We remain where humans do not. He tilted his head, studying me. You are young for the seeking ceremony, but the gift is strong in you. You hear what others miss. What gift? The old understanding, the knowing without words. Your grandmother has it. Your great-grandmother had it stronger. In you, it may be stronger still. He reached out slowly, giving me time to withdraw, and touched my forehead with one massive finger. You are a bridge. Between forgetting and remembering, I felt something when he touched me, like a circuit completing, like suddenly understanding a language I'd heard all my life but never translated. The forest sounds organized themselves into patterns, meanings. I could sense the life around us. The owl hunting 200 yards away, the elk herd bedded down in a valley, the salmon running in the distant river. Everything connected, everything communicating. What did you do to me? Nothing. Only showed you what was always there. You must choose whether to keep seeing or to close your eyes again as most do. We sat together until dawn, communicating in that hybrid language of Kino words, gestures, and wordless knowing. He told me about his people, small groups scattered across the deepest wilderness, maybe 60 individuals remaining in the entire Pacific Northwest. They were dying, not from disease or violence, but from isolation, from habitat loss, from the simple loneliness of being the last. Why show yourself to me? I asked as the sky began to lighten. Because someone must remember that we are real, that we existed, that we tried to live differently. He rose to leave. Your grandmother knows. She has always known. Others have forgotten, or chosen to forget. You must decide which you will be. When Grandma returned on the 4th day, she found me sitting outside the shelter, wide awake, staring at the trees. She took one look at my face and knew. You met one, she said quietly. Not a question. How did you know? Because I met one at my skalalitut, and my grandmother at hers. The forest walkers watch the ceremonies. Sometimes, if the person has the gift, they reveal themselves. She sat beside me, pulling out dried salmon to break my fast. What did he teach you? I told her everything. The conversation, the touch, the sudden awareness of the forest's interconnected life. She listened without interruption, nodding occasionally. The gift has been in our family for generations, she said finally. The ability to understand the old language, to communicate across the boundaries that divide species. It's why we were medicine people, why we knew which plants healed what ailments, Because we could hear the plants speak, hear what the forest was saying. Why didn't you tell me this was real? All those stories about forest walkers. I thought they were myths. Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was crazy? She smiled sadly. The modern world trains people not to believe in anything they can't photograph or measure. Sometimes the only way to know is to experience directly. We hiked back to the reservation and I was different. I could feel it. The forest speaking in patterns of sound and scent and subtle movement. I knew where animals were without seeing them, could sense weather changes hours before they arrived, understood plant medicine in a way my textbooks never explained. But when I tried to share this at school, the response was predictable. You saw Bigfoot during some native ceremony? Jessica Martinez laughed during lunch. Maya, come on, you're smarter than that. I'm not saying I believe in Bigfoot like those TV shows. I'm saying I met an intelligent being that lives in the forest, that has language and culture. And I'm saying you were hallucinating from 4 days without food, she interrupted. Vision quests are literally designed to make you hallucinate. That's the whole point. Even on the reservation, reactions were mixed. The elders nodded knowingly, but said little. The middle-aged generation, my mother's peers, looked uncomfortable, caught between traditional beliefs and modern skepticism. The young people my age mostly rolled their eyes. My cousin did that ceremony, Thomas Running Bear said. He didn't see anything except trees and boredom. You're making it up for attention. Why would I make this up? To look crazy? To feel special? To have some mystical native experience that makes you more authentic? He shrugged. It's what people do. Only Grandma believed me completely. And one other person, Mr. Patterson, my biology teacher at Tahola High, who pulled me aside after I'd mentioned the forest walker in a class discussion about primate evolution. Maya, can we talk privately? In his classroom after school, he said, I want you to understand something. I believe you saw something, but if you keep talking about it publicly, people will dismiss everything else you say. Your grades, your college applications, your credibility, all compromised because you claim to have communicated with a cryptid. So I should lie? Pretend it didn't happen? I'm saying choose your battles. Science requires evidence. Testimony isn't evidence, especially testimony from a teenage girl claiming mystical experiences. He softened. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying the world isn't ready to hear it. And pushing this will hurt you more than help the truth. I left his classroom angry and confused. What was the point of truth if you had to hide it? What was the point of knowledge if sharing it made you a target? That night, I asked Grandma, why do they reveal themselves if no one believes we've seen them? Because belief isn't the point, she said. Relationship is the point. You don't need anyone's permission to know what you know. I stopped talking about the forest walker publicly, but I couldn't stop thinking about him. About them. An entire hidden population struggling toward extinction. I started researching obsessively. Historical accounts of Sasquatch sightings in Quinault territory. Traditional stories from other tribes. Anthropological records of indigenous knowledge about wild men in the forests. The patterns were striking. Every major Pacific Northwest tribe had stories about them. Bukwas, Stick Indians, Mountain Giants, Kelkalitl. Names varied, but descriptions were consistent. Large bipedal beings, intelligent but reclusive, living in the deepest wilderness, occasionally interacting with humans who showed respect. Modern reports existed too, thousands of them. Footprints, vocalizations, blurry photographs. But they were dismissed as hoaxes or misidentification, filed away by cryptozoology enthusiasts who treated the phenomenon like entertainment rather than anthropology. They're hiding in plain sight, I told Grandma. All this evidence, all these stories, and everyone just ignores it because it doesn't fit their worldview. That's by design, she replied. The forest walkers choose to remain hidden, and we, those of us who know, help them stay hidden, because the alternative is worse. What alternative? She showed me a news article from the 1960s about a proposed Bigfoot sanctuary in Northern California after a wave of sightings. Well-meaning people wanted to protect them. But what happens when you create a sanctuary? You draw attention. Researchers, tourists, hunters. The forest walkers had to abandon that entire region. Took them years to find new territory. I started spending more time in the deep forest, leaving offerings like Grandma taught me, hoping for another encounter. It took 6 weeks before he returned, the same forest walker, recognizable by the silver streak across his left shoulder. This time, Our communication was easier. The gift Grandma called it had strengthened, and I could understand his language with less effort. He told me his name, a complex vocalization I approximated as Stone Singer. He was an elder, possibly 70 years old, one of the last who remembered when his people were more numerous. "How many of you are left?" I asked. He showed me with his hands, counting on his fingers. 5 groups, scattered across Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia. Maybe 50 individuals total. They rarely gathered anymore, too risky, too visible. "What will happen to your people?" "We will fade, like morning mist when sun rises. We have accepted this. But that's not right. There should be protections, preservation efforts." "Protection from whom?" "Your people." He gestured at the forest around us, at the stumps of ancient trees visible even in this protected area. "Your people protect what serves them. We serve nothing but the land itself. There is no protection for that." I wanted to argue, but I'd seen the clear cuts, the development, the constant encroachment of roads and houses in human need. Even here, on reservation land that should have been sacred, logging continued because economic development demanded it. My grandmother's generation knew you existed, but my generation doesn't believe. How do I make them understand without exposing you? You don't. You carry the knowledge forward, teach those who can hear, and let the others believe what they choose. He touched my hand gently. His palm was rough, calloused, warm. Some truths are not for everyone. Some knowledge is meant only for those who will honor it. But I was 15 and stubborn and convinced there had to be a way. If I could just prove they existed, carefully, respectfully, with tribal oversight, then maybe protections could be established. Maybe his people could survive. "Would you let me document you?" "Photographs, recordings, but controlled, shared only with people who would help, not exploit?" Stone Singer's expression was profoundly sad. "You want to save us by making us known, but being known is what drives us to extinction. Your people cannot resist possessing what they discover. Not all of us. Please, let me try." Against my grandmother's advice and Stone Singer's reluctance, I began documenting evidence. Not of him directly, I'd promised not to photograph him, but of his presence. I recorded vocalizations from a distance, made plaster casts of footprints, collected hair samples from trees where he'd passed. I filled notebooks with observations of his behavior, diet, communication patterns. My plan was to present this evidence to the tribal council. If the Quinault Nation officially recognized the forest walkers as relatives deserving protection, they could designate certain areas as sacred sites, off limits to logging and development. It could work. It had to work. I spent 3 months gathering evidence, and in that time, I got to know Stone Singer's world more intimately. He showed me how his people lived, in small family groups, moving seasonally, living on salmon, roots, berries, and deer. They had language, art, traditions passed down through generations. They carved symbols into trees, created temporary shelters with sophisticated engineering, and maintained territories through complex social negotiations with neighboring groups. They were people, completely, undeniably people, just not human people. Stone Singer also showed me why they were dying. Habitat fragmentation meant groups couldn't safely travel to find mates. Diseases caught from human proximity, respiratory infections, parasites, devastated them because they had no immunity. And loneliness. With numbers so small, individuals sometimes went years without seeing others of their kind. "Your daughter," I asked one day, having learned he'd once had family. "What happened to her?" "Caught human sickness, fever, coughing, wasting away. She died when the leaves turned red. 5 winters passed. His grief was palpable. My mate died the winter after. Heart stopped, but I think from sadness. I am alone now." "You're not alone. You have me. You have my grandmother. Different kind of alone. No one to speak my heart language with. No one to sing the old songs. No one to remember our names when I die." The weight of that loneliness nearly crushed me. To be the last, to carry the entirety of a culture with no one to pass it to, I couldn't imagine that burden. I finalized my presentation for the tribal council, organizing evidence, preparing arguments. Grandma tried to stop me. "Maya, you're not ready for this. The consequences, someone has to speak for them. They're dying, Grandma. Slowly, quietly, and no one even knows they exist. They know they exist, that's what matters. It's not enough." The tribal council meeting was scheduled for November. I was so focused on preparation that I missed the signs. The increased logging activity near Stone Singer's territory, the survey crews marking new access roads, the rumors of economic development plans that would require opening up underutilized reservation land. Stone Singer found me 3 days before the meeting, more agitated than I'd ever seen him. He gestured urgently, combining it with rapid vocalizations I struggled to parse. Danger, humans coming, his people at risk. What's happening? He led me deep into his territory, to an area I'd never seen. There, spray-painted on trees in bright orange, were survey markers, dozens of them, outlining boundaries for what was clearly a major logging operation. My heart sank. This is your core territory, where you shelter, where you fish. They come in machines, cutting, measuring, marking. We cannot stay here, but there is nowhere else. Every forest is shrinking. When does the logging start? He showed me a posted notice on a tree. Timber harvest scheduled to begin December 1st, less than a month away. I realized with cold certainty my presentation to the tribal council was about to become more complicated than I'd imagined, because I wasn't just advocating for abstract protection anymore. I was asking them to stop a logging operation that probably represented significant economic benefit. Conservation versus commerce. Belief versus skepticism. The invisible versus the profitable. And I was a 15-year-old girl asking adults to believe in something they couldn't see, to sacrifice money for a species they didn't think existed. The tribal council meeting room was packed. Not just council members, but community members who'd heard rumors about my presentation. Word had spread that Eleanor's granddaughter is going to talk about Bigfoot, and people showed up half for curiosity, half for entertainment. Council Chairman Robert James called the meeting to order. Maya Blackwater has requested time to address the council regarding the proposed timber harvest in the upper Quino drainage. Maya, you have 15 minutes. I stood, my carefully organized evidence feeling suddenly inadequate. Around me sat people I'd known my entire life, the teachers who'd encouraged me, the elders who'd taught me traditional skills, the community members who remembered my father. They looked skeptical but patient. I'm here to ask you to cancel the timber harvest in the upper canal drainage, or at minimum delay it for environmental review. On what grounds? Asked Council Member Patricia Wells. The harvest was approved after proper survey. We need the revenue for community programs. On the grounds that the area is inhabited by a protected population that will be displaced or endangered by logging. What population? The environmental impact survey showed standard wildlife, deer, elk, black bear, nothing endangered. I took a breath. The forest walkers, what scientists call Sasquatch. They live in that drainage. I've documented their presence over 3 months. The room erupted. Some people laughed, others looked angry. A few elders exchanged glances that suggested they took me more seriously than the rest. Chairman James banged his gavel. Order. Maya, that's a serious claim. What evidence do you have? I presented everything. The plaster casts, audio recordings, photographs of tree markings, hair samples, my detailed observational notes. I explained the traditional knowledge that supported their existence, quoted accounts from our own tribal history, argued that as relatives they deserved protection under our cultural values. Council member David Running Bear, Thomas's uncle, spoke up. Maya, I respect your dedication, but this is folklore. Yes, our ancestors spoke of forest spirits and wild men, but those were stories, metaphors for respecting nature. They weren't metaphors. They were literal descriptions of actual beings that our ancestors interacted with regularly. Then why has no one produced a body? A clear photograph? Verifiable DNA? In the age of trail cameras and cell phones, why is all evidence still ambiguous? Because they're intelligent enough to avoid documentation. They've survived by remaining hidden. Or because they don't exist, he said, not unkindly. Maya, you're a bright kid with a promising future, but you're asking us to sacrifice significant revenue, money for scholarships, elder care, infrastructure, based on evidence that wouldn't satisfy any scientific standard. Elder Joseph White Bear raised his hand. If I may speak. The room quieted. He was respected, traditional, a keeper of old knowledge. I believe Maya has seen something. The forest walkers are real. I have known this my entire life, as my father knew, as his mother knew. But I also know that some knowledge is not meant to be shared with those who lack ears to hear it. With respect, Uncle, Patricia Wells said, we can't make policy decisions based on traditional stories. We have a responsibility to the entire community. Jobs, services, practical needs. Grandma stood from the back of the room. Then let me add my testimony. I have walked with the forest walkers. I have left them offerings for 40 years, and they have accepted them. They are our relatives, and we have a duty to protect them. Eleanor, you're asking us to believe in something we can't verify, Chairman James said carefully. Even if we wanted to approve Maya's request, we'd need evidence that would satisfy federal oversight, environmental agencies, legal standards. Personal testimony isn't enough. The vote was predictable. Motion to delay or cancel the timber harvest failed 7-2. Only the elders voted in my favor. I left the meeting devastated, Grandma's arm around my shoulders. You did what you could, she said. It wasn't enough. Stone Singer's home will be destroyed, and I couldn't stop it. That night I hiked into the forest to tell him, to apologize for failing, for exposing his existence without achieving protection, for proving that his pessimism about human nature was justified. I found him in our usual meeting place, but he wasn't alone. Stone Singer sat in the clearing with 3 others, 2 adults and a juvenile, smaller and more delicate than him. His family group, or what remained of it. They all turned as I approached, amber eyes reflecting my headlamp. I'm sorry, I said, my voice breaking. I tried. I told them everything, showed them the evidence, but they don't believe. The logging starts in 2 weeks. Stone Singer made a gesture I'd learned meant acceptance. Inevitability. We know. We have been preparing to leave. Where will you go? North. Deeper mountains, smaller territory. We will manage. But I could see the toll it took, the exhaustion in his posture, the way the juvenile clung to one of the adults, the resignation that said this was just another retreat in a long series of retreats that would eventually run out of places to retreat to. The younger female approached me cautiously, making soft sounds. Stone Singer translated. She asks if all humans are like those at your gathering, unwilling to see what stands before them. No, some humans believe. My grandmother, some of the elders, but not enough, and the ones who don't believe have the power. This is why we chose to remain hidden centuries ago, because being known means being controlled, and being controlled means losing what makes us ourselves. I sat with them for hours, knowing it might be our last meeting. The juvenile, Stone Singer's grandnephew, I learned, was curious about my world, asking questions through gestures and vocalizations about human technology, human numbers, human reasons for constant expansion. We're afraid, I tried to explain. Afraid of not having enough, of being vulnerable, of death. So we try to control everything, own everything, buffer ourselves with possessions and power. You trade freedom for the illusion of safety, Stone Singer observed. We chose differently, accepted vulnerability as the price of remaining free. Now we face extinction, but we face it as ourselves. As dawn approached, I made a decision. What if I could buy you time? Not permanently, but enough to delay the logging while I find another way. How? I'll tell them something they might believe, that there are endangered spotted owls in that drainage. It's possible. The habitat is right, and environmental protections for owls could stop the harvest long enough to lie for us? To use a truth they'll accept to protect a truth they won't. Stone Singer considered this, consulting with his group through their complex language. Finally, you would sacrifice your reputation, your credibility, for temporary delay, for any chance at all. He reached out and touched my face with surprising gentleness. You are young to carry such burdens, but if you choose this path, we honor your choice. I spent the next week discovering spotted owl evidence in the Upper Kino drainage, manufactured with Stone Singer's help, placing feathers and pellets he gathered from actual owls in other areas. It was fraud, but fraud in service of a truth the world wasn't ready to acknowledge. I reported my findings to the State Environmental Office, triggering a mandatory review that delayed the timber harvest by 6 months. The tribal council was furious. Several members accused me of sabotage, and there were calls for investigation into the convenient timing of my discovery. But the delay held, and in that 6 months, something unexpected happened. Grandma fell ill, pneumonia that turned serious fast. She was hospitalized in Aberdeen, 40 miles from the reservation, her condition deteriorating despite antibiotics. The doctors prepared us for the worst. On the 7th night, when her fever peaked and her breathing became labored, I sat beside her hospital bed holding her hand. She was barely conscious, muttering in Kino, sometimes speaking to people who weren't there. Around 2 a.m., I heard something outside the window. 3rd floor, no balcony, no ledge wide enough for humans. A massive hand pressed against the glass, and I saw Stone Singer's face in the darkness, amber eyes glowing in the parking lot lights. Impossible. But there. He made a gesture. Open window. I opened the window and Stone Singer somehow pulled himself up. I still don't understand the climbing ability, and entered the hospital room with supernatural silence. He was holding something wrapped in cedar bark, a bundle of plants I recognized from Grandma's teachings but in combinations I'd never seen. He moved to Grandma's bedside, and her eyes flickered open. She saw him, and smiled weakly. "Old friend," she whispered in Kino. "You came, for the one who remembered us, who taught the young one to see." He unwrapped the bundle, revealing a complex medicine. Roots, bark, leaves, fungi, all gathered from the deep forest. He began preparing it with motions that showed generations of knowledge, creating a poultice he applied to Grandma's chest and a tea he helped her drink. I should have questioned it, should have called for doctors, but something in me trusted completely. We sat with her through the night, Stone Singer and me, while his medicine worked through her system. By dawn, her fever had broken. By afternoon, she was breathing normally. The doctors called it a turning point, the moment the antibiotics finally took effect. But I knew better, and so did Grandma. The hospital incident changed things. Nurses reported unusual circumstances, unexplained odors, a massive handprint on the outside window that was photographed before anyone could dismiss it, security footage showing a shape on the roof that shouldn't have been there. The story spread through the reservation like wildfire. People started asking questions. The elders began speaking more openly about their own experiences with the forest walkers. Even skeptics had to acknowledge that something had happened. Whether they called it Sasquatch or unknown factors depended on their worldview, but the certainty that nothing was there cracked. Within a month, the tribal council held a new meeting. Chairman James spoke carefully. "In light of recent events and growing community concern about cultural heritage preservation, we're proposing to designate the Upper Kino drainage as a traditional cultural property. This designation would require more stringent environmental review and limit commercial activity. It wasn't perfect protection, but it was something. The logging was permanently delayed pending studies that would take years. I visited Stone Singer to share the news, finding him in the drainage that was now tentatively safer. "It's not enough," I told him. "The protection is fragile, based on cultural grounds rather than your existence. It could be overturned. It is enough for now, and now is all any of us have." He gestured at his small family group, at the forest around them. "You gave us time to live, to teach the young one our ways, to exist a little longer. That is a great gift. But you're still endangered, still heading toward extinction. All things end, young one. The question is not whether we survive forever, but whether we lived with dignity, with freedom, with honor to what we are." He touched my shoulder. "You helped ensure we could do that. The rest is not your burden to carry. I'm 28 now, teaching environmental science at Northwest Indian College. Grandma passed away at 87, peacefully, surrounded by family. Before she died, she gave me her journals, decades of observations, encounters, wisdom about the forest walkers that she'd never published. I keep that knowledge private, as she did. But I teach my students about sacred responsibilities, about knowledge that serves relationship rather than exploitation, about the importance of protecting what we cannot prove. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the deep forest, I hear familiar vocalizations echoing through the valleys. I leave offerings as Grandma taught me, and they're always accepted. Whether Stone Singer is still alive or his people have passed on their traditions, I don't know. What I know is this: some truths are too important to require belief. Some relationships transcend evidence, and sometimes the greatest act of witness is protecting silence instead of breaking it. My daughter is 7 now, and she's starting to show the gift, hearing things others miss, understanding the forest's language. When she's ready, I'll teach her what Grandma taught me, not because I need her to believe in the forest walkers, but because she needs to understand that the world is larger, stranger, and more sacred than textbooks acknowledge.